Hi, this is Char.
And this is Laura. Today, we're going to spend the next 30 minutes sharing what we want to show you at the intersection of ideas and experiences. We realized that despite our very different backgrounds, locations, and experiences, we have a lot of commonalities that we did not expect. So we thought you might have some as well and would like to share ours with you. Today, we just had a holiday, so we'd really like to chat to you and share our experiences of holidays, and we'd love to hear about yours.
So I don't know about you, Laura, but this past weekend was Easter weekend for my family. And on Saturday, we got together at our camper up along the shore of Lake Erie. And we had all of our favorite foods that my brother and I remembered eating over the Easter holiday that my mom would make for us. We would spend our time when I was growing up, because my dad was a teacher, we had a break from school over this particular holiday, and we would go to Florida with our camper and stay in a campground right along the Gulf of Mexico. And my mom would bring this like cooler full of food. So the food that I made this weekend and my brother made, we had pierogies and we had kielbasa. And we had like a pasta salad with like tuna and green pepper and egg like mixed in with it, and baked beans and some rolls. Like that for us was, and some ham. Those were like the things that we would have for our family Easter meal in a campground in Florida. So have you heard of any of those food items?
I mean, I've heard of ham and tuna and pasta, but beyond that, I'm a little bit lost, and I'd love for you to explain to me. Oh, I also know what egg is.
So why I started thinking about this is because you and I have shared before that maple syrup is a common food item in Ohio. There are maple sugaring places around here. We use maple syrup on many of our breakfast foods and some other foods. And we've talked about maple syrup. So why I said that is because maple syrup was on the table on Saturday for dinner to go along with our meal. So we had pierogies. Pierogies are Polish, maybe German. They're kind of a pasta dough, but a little thicker. And you make these pockets out of the dough that would fit like in the palm of your hand. And you can fill a pierogi with cottage cheese or mashed potatoes and cheddar cheese or onion. Some people put sauerkraut in them. And then you fill the dough and then you smush the edges down to seal it. And then you put them in a little bit of water to steam, kind of like a dumpling. And then you fry them with some butter and some onion. So they get
kind of like ravioli.
Kind of like a ravioli, a little bit thicker dough and bigger.
Okay.
Like
I have to try that.
Where the syrup comes in is some people put sour cream on their pierogies. Some people put applesauce on their pierogies. And in our family, we put syrup on our pierogies.
Honestly, all of that sounds unusual.
I like unusual. Unusual translates as that doesn't sound tasty, but I'm being polite. So yes, it actually. Then we had along with that some kielbasa. So kielbasa is sausage that has some garlic in it. It's a pretty dense sausage, so you usually use a knife to cut it. The way we make it, you cut the sausage lengthwise in half, and then you grill it with the cut side down to heat it up. So the kielbasa then goes along with the pierogies. And then we also had some ham. And then my mom always made this pasta salad out of shell pasta and Miracle Whip mayonnaise dressing with some tuna and canned peas and sliced up green pepper and celery and some diced up hard-boiled egg, like all mixed together. That was our like looked forward to it Easter meal.
It's really nice to have food memories like that.
And it's
There's
funny,
nothing as comforting.
just eating like that bite full of like the tuna pasta salad stuff, like took me right back to my mom having the big bowl of it in the cooler that she took all the way from Ohio to Florida so that we would have that for like our meals. So that's my good memory of this particular holiday. How about you?
So we had we have some extended family that was actually celebrating Passover. And we have quite an eclectic mix of people. So we just had a potluck for Easter Sunday. We invited family and adopted family, people who have become like family. And we had quite an eclectic mix, as potlucks tend to be. So we had ratatouille and we had pie. And I think everybody just made their favorite things. So we had this amazing, do you have pumpkin fritters?
No.
Okay, so we make pumpkin fritters. It's mostly a Malay thing. And we've got the strong Malay influence, especially in Cape Town. So it's a little fritter cake made of pumpkin, basically.
Okay.
And then you they're supposed to be really crispy on the outside and sort of soft on the inside. And then you sprinkle them with cinnamon and sugar.
Oh, that sounds delicious.
So we had those, and potato wedges and all the favorite little things we don't usually eat because we're watching our sugar levels and things. So so that was lovely. And we just had a really nice family day. So on a lot of the holidays, because a lot of people don't necessarily celebrate the same holidays, we just have a family meal, and it means it's just personal what you're actually celebrating to yourself. So I think that's the point, though, is to get together with family and good friends and people you can count on, people you want to count on, and just share your memories with them, because it also makes new memories. And food is such a big part of that. It's kind of a pity in a way, because I think that's a lot of that food is it's more than just like to nourish us for a lot of us, but I think that it's also a way to stay linked to our pasts and our childhoods and our families.
That's such an important thing to think about. I had friends who were celebrating Passover this past weekend as well, and the conversation that we had together were about the family pieces of that celebration, being together with family who doesn't live close to you and they were traveling in, or family traditions to go along with the unique food items and the special events that they were looking forward to. And it really does come back to the food that really it's food that you don't think about making during the rest of the year, or that's food that is something that your mom made or your grandmother made or the aunt made that you continue to make because it is that tie back to your past and what you think about, which is so important.
Yes. I mean, there are dishes that my mom used to make that my husband thinks are absolutely horrendous, but I love them because my mom used to make them when I was little. And vice versa. There are things that his gran used to make that I will not eat, but they remind him of growing up with his gran.
I think my husband feels that way about the tuna pasta salad that I made for this weekend. He took a spoonful and that was okay. But he's like, I've never eaten this before until your mother had made it. Like, this was something that was completely new to him and not anything that anyone in his family had made. So I think that like bringing together of food too is a way that you build those connections. So I'm curious, what is it that you love to make that your mom makes that your husband wants no part of?
So there's actually nothing. I've converted him quite a lot. But I think the first thing I made was a spaghetti dish. When I was a child, I suffered a lot from respiratory infections, and my mom used to make this dish with chicken and spaghetti. It's basically very, very plain. And because I would eat it. And then I introduced it to my husband, and we added leeks to make it more palatable for him. And he grew to like it. And then we stopped eating meat. So now we make it with leeks and like a fake far chicken. And it's grown on him over the years. And he now actually enjoys it and makes it as well. So, but I remember there were some casseroles and things when we first met, and he just did not understand. Like there was a tuna casserole my mom used to make, which sounds very similar to the pasta salad, but it was hot, and he was not going to eat that.
It's so funny that, you know, food is something that is such a connector to us for our families, yet food is also such a unique thing when you meet new people. Like, these are our favorite things. Never heard of those, never made those, have never had that. And then it builds that connection with like your new friends and your new family, because you're introducing that new food to them, and they bring their new food to the table, and you decide that you both like those things and are willing to try it. It's like such an analogy to ideas. Like, hey, I'm going to meet you, and I'm bringing my ideas and my family background to the table. Wow, those are ideas and things that I've not heard before, but I'm interested in hearing about them, and maybe I'll try them, and over time I'll grow to like them, or together we'll like add some things to them so that we can both agree that we like it this way.
I want you to eat it, and I want you to like it.
And
our ideas are exactly the same.
Yes.
So I've been introducing these dishes to my niece. And so I'm bringing her into my frame of reference as well, which is it's pretty amazing actually. It feels like we share so much more family now that she's her parents are quite different from us in terms of lifestyle and things. So for example, like we don't eat meat and they do. So now that she's older, she's 12 now, and now that she's older, we can include her in our life as well, which is lovely. But there are some things that are still not going to happen. You were talking about the maple syrup.
Yes.
I told you before that it's prohibitively expensive here. And I actually shared your story of having maple syrup with pizza with my friends yesterday. And they were as horrified as I originally was.
Right. Like, it's disgusting. I just can't imagine. But we used syrup multiple times this weekend. Like, we had syrup on our waffles. We had syrup on pancakes. We had syrup on pierogies. Like, syrup is a staple in the cupboards here. And I
do love it.
Because it's not as expensive. And you know, syrup on sausage, especially breakfast sausages, is a pretty typical thing. But I still can't put syrup on the pizza. The other thing that you and I have talked about are like the meals we remember from school. And you know, we've just spent all this time talking about how food bonds people together. It's a way to introduce people to your culture. It's a way to introduce people to your family, or bring people into your family, or create new things for your new family or your new friends, like through food. And I also think, Laura, about the conversations we've had around access to food at school, and how culturally, for a student who in the United States is on free and reduced lunch, so they go up and they're getting whatever the lunch meal is, but they don't have access to the additional food, the additional treat, the additional whatever. They get the base meal. And what that does in terms of setting kids apart. I know there's families who don't even want to apply for free and reduced lunch because they don't want their child to be set apart. Because food, even at school, is such a commonality thing. Everybody's looking at, what did you bring for lunch? What are you eating for lunch?
Mm.
And if you don't have something that's matching everybody else, like the impact that can have on you at lunch.
And Char, we spoke about how competitive parents seem to have become when we were all raised on, PB&J and an apple. That was a decent lunch. That was what everybody got. And now it's bento boxes. And I mean, I'd love a bento box. I'm not going to say I wouldn't have enjoyed one, but it would have been different. Getting a cookie in your lunchbox was a treat, along with your PB&J and your apple.
Right.
And now, we don't have school lunches. So that just divides the kids even more because there's nobody getting the same thing. And the parents seem to compete with one another. And a lot of parents seem to think that it's healthier. But I mean, what is healthier than, good fats, carbs, protein? That's what a PB&J gives you. It's a healthy meal. It's good food. And the upshot of not getting lunches is not only that it divides the kids because of what they have, but whether they have lunch at all. We have so much poverty. I mean, we have, and it's so difficult to get people to fund or donate food for kids. It shouldn't be. It should be a no-brainer, but it's not. And I think I've told you the story about an ex-teacher that I was friends with. And they had a lot of children from the local orphanage at their school where she taught. And she was very cognizant of the fact that these children would have to go line up outside the staff room to get their lunch, and how humiliating it was for them. And so she said that she would be willing to make lunch because there were a lot of low-income families as well. So she'd be willing to make sandwiches, and anybody who needed a sandwich could come there. And she was also willing to fund it. And the school just refused. I to this day, I cannot figure out why. I don't know why, but these kinds of things are so common. And if you, heaven forbid, you get a high income school, because then you're going to have a few children from low income families, and they're not going to be able to compete. And there are days that are going to be that they don't have lunch. And there will never be, it's not going to be a case of, oh, you don't have lunch, let me share my lunch with you. It's like, oh, you don't have lunch because you didn't want to bring lunch. The worst interpretation, or the closest, is that you have an eating disorder. There is no consideration of, oh, you actually don't have bread at house. Your parents cannot send you to lunch. They are spending what they can to get you to school so that you don't have to starve when you grow up.
Right. I think that's a big difference, Laura. You and I have talked together about our own meals. And, my husband and I are not quite vegetarian completely, but we eat a lot of vegetarian food. And we've shared that level on as adults in our families back and forth. But from a school perspective, in the United States, school lunches are provided for students who don't have them, and lunch is eaten at school regardless, because you're at school for a 7-hour day or a 6-hour day. So all children are going to have lunch at school. And during the pandemic, that was one of the things that was a real priority, was how do we feed children who were dependent on those school lunches, and in many schools on school breakfast. So 2 meals a day were coming through the school system. And how do you continue that if we are not in school, or if we're in school on a different model? And so many schools became very innovative in using their school bus drivers to transport lunches to children, all children. So it wasn't just the children who qualified for something, in terms of equity, all children in districts that needed lunch, those children all got lunch because that was part of what we were doing. And then I was so pleased with the federal government response, and at the state level, they made lunch is available for everyone through the federal lunch program. So districts could use the money instead of looking at food costs, could use that money for safety measures and cleaning measures and staffing measures. And all children were given lunch. And now the conversation is shifting back to, okay, we're not going to provide that anymore. You're going to go back to the district can provide lunch. We'll still have free and reduced lunch. But that was such an equity piece. Like, how can we continue to just offer lunch for everyone so that it is available and it isn't you need to go stand in line or you're called out because you don't have access to this food. Food is such a equity piece. Having access to safe food is such an equity piece. And if we really are focusing on helping every child be successful, then food should be part of that, because we know as a family, food is what brings you together. And for a child, like having those meals at school and being a part of that friend group and feeling like they belong is so important too, I think.
And it's just, I mean, it's a fundamental need. You know, you can't expect a child who hasn't eaten in 2 days to learn. I think that feeling of hopelessness, that it just, it ruins everything. You know, you can't get away from it. It's not, I think there's nothing more heartbreaking than a hungry child. And I think that that's such a win, actually, that the federal school system did for you. So we had communities here coming together and feeding the children during the pandemic. Not that they got school at lunches, but a lot of people couldn't work, for example, especially like day laborers and people in poorer communities. And the communities would come together and they would partner with the more affluent community. And the more affluent community would share, sort of, to an extent, so that there was some food provided maybe 3 times a week at the very least, which is not enough, but it's something. So, and there are a lot of organizations, NPOs and so on, that do actually feed kids in communities. There's a community nearby here. It's informal housing. They call it, it's affectionately known as Tin Can Town. And they got a container that they've refitted as a kitchen, and they have just I'm trying not to use Afrikaans words.
Oh, go ahead and use the Afrikaner word and then you can explain it.
We call it meal. It's cornmeal, basically. It's the white maize, and that's a staple food for a lot of people. So they serve a hot breakfast every morning, and it's just a reason for the parents and the kids just to get out of bed, because you have nothing to get up for, you know. So it's a reason to get out of bed, and it's a reason to get dressed, and it also just gives you the strength, I think, to face another day. And it's not gourmet. It's not going to be pancakes and maple syrup, but it's something hot and it's nutritious and it's filling. And that I think that's so important, just the hope it gives you.
I think the hope that it gives you and that sense that someone is caring about your basic needs, and that for families, that has to be such a stress reliever on the parents who are worrying about themselves, worrying about their children, worrying about their housing, worrying about their job, and to know that food is available and is being provided is one less thing than that the parents are taking with them as a load to carry, which I think is also important. You know, you were also, you just talked about foods that are a staple. That made me think about just cultural relevance for a child too, that being able to bring a lunch or have a meal that is also representative of your culture and having that respected by someone else is important. You know, I can think of so many stories that I've heard and read over time about children who've brought a traditional meal that the parents have cooked at home or a grandmother has cooked at home to school to eat. And it's something that is outside the norm. It's not a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with an apple. You know, it's something that is a family item that maybe the other children don't have any experience with. And how important it is to be comfortable bringing your own food and being able to talk about it as this is an important part of me, and not I'm just going to sit and eat with my box kind of closed and hope no one notices that what I have doesn't look like what everybody else has. And I think as educators, that's something we should be cognizant of, that food is such an important part of your family and who you are, and the ability to be able to bring that food with you to your school setting and have it be embraced and acknowledged as something that is important or unique to you and a sharing opportunity versus an opportunity to set you apart or other you, I think is an important lesson that we need to think about.
That actually links back. That's a great point, Char. It links back to, I think, the competing as well. I heard a story of a teacher actually told this story when I was in high school, which was a very long time ago. But she had a child in her class whose family was really struggling, and they had some link to a fishing community, or they were part of a fishing community, and there are these cheap little fish that you can buy in places. And so this child would have fish sandwiches and would try to eat in class, and all the other kids would, make fun of this child smelling like fish and say, can't you put something else in your sandwiches? But there was literally nothing else. That was all this child had to eat.
Yep.
And so the teacher said, she decided to help. And she said to the children, where she comes from, they're all making fun of where she comes from, it's a delicacy. And it was very highly prized when she was growing up, and they don't know what they're talking about because, it may smell one way to them, but it's actually really delicious. And the next day she came to school and there were 3 of these little fish wrapped in newspaper on her desk. So,
wow.
I mean, first of all, it's you right in the fields because these children had this family had almost nothing, but
Yes.
just that kind of, that it means so much, to just normalize it and to bring it out into the open while he didn't have to hide his little lunchbox anymore.
Right.
He could be proud of it, and that acceptance that you were talking about, that acceptance of your food and your culture and your history and your circumstances is so important. I think there's a lot of fuss these days about purpose and meaning at work, and that's super important. But it's like acceptance at school. It's super important, but it's not enough. So you need, for me to really feel like I'm happy with my job, which by the way I am right now, I need to have meaning and purpose, but I also need a decent salary so that I can live. And a child to learn needs acceptance, belonging, and they need lunch.
Yes, they need lunch, and it is such a way to make connections for them. It's a way of saying, we're feeding your stomach so you can feed your brain. It's a way of saying, we accept you for who you are. We're really interested in getting to know you or being with you. Just sitting down, just the act of sitting down together around a lunch table, whether you're an adult or a child, can be either very culture building, or it can be an awful time. And I really think, as we've been talking today, Laura, the emphasis on it can be a wonderful time. Like sharing a meal together brings you together with other people. It gives you opportunities to talk and learn more about them and to build some empathy for them, like the teacher did with the little boy with his fish sandwiches. I mean, that was modeling empathy, like understanding that this is where you are, this is what you're bringing, this is what you have, and that is enough. And, you know, through food or through ideas, the fact that you can sit around a table and share that meal is so important.
Yes.
And, you know, as a school administrator, thinking about working with districts and talking to people about new programs that they have and new opportunities, this really has gotten me thinking about, you know, what are your lunchroom experiences like for children? And, you know, what are the conversations that occur, and what is the food that's being served? And we try and cut down on lunch, you know, 10-minute lunch, 15-minute lunch, because it's easier to manage. Yet those are the times where children can build friendships or talk with people maybe they don't have an opportunity to interact with, and maybe look forward to as something that's really important. So that's a big takeaway for me today from our conversation, I think.
I think for me as well is you were talking about sharing a meal and sharing ideas, and I think that it's so important to nourish both the body and your mind, and the metaphorical dinner table is such an important place to do that. This weekend is the 30th anniversary of the death of Chris Hani. He was killed on Easter weekend. He was an extremely important freedom fighter, and his death spurred on a lot of progress. And it's just so important that we keep having these conversations. You know, we keep building. It's quite an emotional thing, I think, for a lot of South Africans. And it's so important that we keep having these conversations, we keep nourishing these relationships, these connections. In South Africa, especially where there's already so much division, where we use food and ideas to unite.
Food is very powerful as a uniter, and I agree with you. I think that is the point from our conversation today. When you're coming to the table, like, come to the table with food, idea of food and actual food that is going to help build bridges and make connections and not be divisive. Because here in the United States, I think that's more and more important as well. Well, this was a great conversation today, Laura. We know there's so much more to see than what we shared today. Certainly some more uses. So much more uses for maple syrup in particular, but yes, there's so much more that we can dive into, and we'd love for you to show us what you see, or use our conversation today as an opportunity to share what you see with others. Laura, it's always great talking with you.
Thank you, Char. As always, inspired, and to anyone listening, thank you so much.